Hey everybody, welcome to HuffPost's first virtual workshop, Think Before You Click, How You Can Fight Misinformation Online. I'm Lizelle Tanglao, Senior Editor for Membership and Innovation at HuffPost, and I'll be your host today. We're really glad you can be here with us today. We're here thanks to you, our members. One of the most frequently requested topics for a workshop event is how to fact check the news, and we're excited to bring you today with our experts whose expertise will be insightful in helping you debunk misinformation. In these uncertain times, where finding accurate and reliable information can be a challenge, we wanted to arm you with the tools to help you distinguish what's real and what's false. Just a few things before we get started. We'd love to have this as interactive as possible. If you can, start your video. You can find that function at the bottom left of your screen. This way we can all see one another. Secondly, we want to hear from you. So if you have a question you'd like to ask live, all you have to do is raise your virtual hand. You can do that by clicking participants at the bottom of your screen, and then you'll see a panel open up on the right with the raise hand feature. Let's all try raising our virtual hands now to make sure it's working for everyone. Cool. Go ahead and lower your hand by clicking that icon again. After you click the raise hand today, you'll see a chat message at the bottom of your screen where you'll hear directly from one of our HuffPost moderators. They'll all have HuffPost branded pink and green backgrounds, very easy to spot. Can the moderators wave so everyone knows? And they'll also have the moderator label in front of their names. So we'll try our best to get to your questions. And when it's your turn, we'll call you up live. And if you do have a question to ask today, I encourage you to click that virtual hand raise button as soon as possible. If you submitted a question during our registration, our moderators may reach out to see if you want to ask that question live. So check that chat feature periodically to see if you have a message. You can also chat the same moderators directly if you have any technical issues or questions about how to participate. Also, feel free to use Zoom's virtual clap and hands thumbs up features. And before I forget, if you'd like to support our journalism, think about joining HuffPost membership. You'll get access to our comments section, invites to our virtual events, and more. That's all for me for now. I'm going to toss to Maarten Schenk, who is the co-founder of Lead Stories, who will be leading us through some of the best practices in debunking misinformation. Maarten?
Hi, let me turn on screen sharing real quick. So I'm Maarten, and my job is basically hunting fake news for a living. Don't take my word for it. You can trust the BBC. They also say that I'm the man fighting to protect you from fake news. And if you don't trust the BBC, even InfoWars says I'm one of Facebook's top fact checkers. For one time, they spoke the truth, actually. So how did I get here? Several years ago, I built something called the Trendalizer engine, and that's a tool to figure out what's going trending, what's going viral on the internet. And we found that Trendalizer turned out to be a great way to monitor fake news websites, because we could literally spot anytime they had a viral story take off. We could see it within a few hours, or within an hour even sometimes. So we launched a website called Lead Stories, where we would debunk all these false stories. We would be the first ones to write, "This is not true," and then people searching on Google for "is it true that something something," they would find our article and come to our site. So since February of 2019, we're part of Facebook's third-party fact-checking partnership. That means that if we spot a story that might not entirely be correct, we write a fact check about it. In this case, some website wrote that the Church of Sweden said Greta Thunberg was the successor to Jesus Christ, which is not correct, because in fact it was only a local pastor who sends out one tweet and got a lot of backfire for it, but it was definitely not an edict or a pronouncement from the Church of Sweden, so he wrote a fact check about it. And then we put that fact check into Facebook's system, and anyone who still shares the debunked article will now get a related articles block under that article. And if you try to share the story, you will also get a pop-up that says, hey, there is additional information available from fact checkers. Are you sure you still want to share this? Note that this does not delete or hide the story. You can still see it, you can still share it, but you get additional information about it. So how do we work? How do we find these stories? First of all, we have our own Trendalizer engine that we use to monitor the internet for viral content. We also have access to a special tool from Facebook that gives us lists of content that has been flagged by Facebook's users as potentially fake news. And we also get some tips from our readers or via social media. So we might see something trending on Twitter under the hashtag fake news, and we decide to investigate. So that's how we look out for relevant and trending stories that might look suspicious. And then the journalism happens. So it's not magic. So we don't point some software tool at the story and that software then says, this is fake. No, it doesn't work like that. So it's journalism. So first of all, you have to track down the original version of the story. Because sometimes it originated on a satire website, or it's a very old story or a very old photo. And if you can prove that, then you're basically done. Sometimes you also have to verify records, court records, documents, tax records. You have to contact experts, make phone calls, do geolocation on videos and all those sorts of things. And some things are easy to disprove, others are a bit harder. And some things are just plain impossible to conclusively prove true or fake, but fortunately, these are rare. So a few examples of these kinds of stories. Here's a man named Christopher Blair that the BBC called the godfather of fake news. He's actually a former builder from Maine. He's very liberal, a Hillary Clinton supporter. And he has a whole network of sites that publish satirical stories that will get the blood boiling of various Republicans or conservative Christians. But as you can see, there are clear hints. So there's a satire logo here. Also in the text, there are clear hints. In the photo, there's also a logo here that says satire if you look very well. So it's a satire site, but his content often gets stolen by Pakistani or Macedonian-run fake news sites that present the stories as if they are real news. So then we fact-check them. It's very easy. We can just point out, hey, this actually came from a liberal satire website. What are you getting upset about? Other stories can take a bit more work. Take this example, a video of birds supposedly attacking a 5G tower. This was making the rounds in various anti-5G Facebook groups. I was able to track down a better copy of the video that was posted a few days before. And in that video, there was one frame in which you could see a license plate and a sign on the wall of a building. So I managed to discover that in Victoria, in Australia, the license plates look like this. And I managed to find that the logo of the Core Wellness and Swim School located in Victoria in Melbourne looks like this. And that's an exact match with the logo in the video. So I was able to pinpoint the exact location of the cell phone tower in the video and the exact parking lot. Based on that, I could look up where there was actual 5G coverage in Melbourne and that there wasn't any near that cell phone tower. And I was able to get a statement from BirdLife Australia explaining what these birds are. They are corellas. And this is normal playful behavior for them. So they regularly demolish roofing, antennae, window sills, flower pots, anything that's loose and outside, they will pick apart with their beaks. They're a regular plague in those parts of the world. So I could prove that it wasn't attacking behavior by these birds, and it wasn't even a 5G tower. But yeah, as you can see, that took a bit of work. Another very simple technique that people can use to quickly discover if something is real or false is built into most web browsers these days. So you can right-click on almost any image on the internet these days and then search Google with this image. And that will give you a number of results, and then you can see how old these results are. Because this particular image, for example, was being posted to Facebook and Twitter, claiming it was a document dropped by Antifa protesters during the recent riots. But if you do a quick reverse image search on Google, you can see that the image was already online in 2018. So that this clearly had nothing to do with the recent riots. Another thing that you should be mindful of is highway sharks. What are highway sharks? That's something we in fact-checking circles call these images that keep coming back whenever a similar event happens. So every time there is a hurricane in the United States, this image turns up saying, yeah, the highway near local city has been flooded and the sharks are swimming on the highway. This is a photoshopped image, it's years old. And with every mass shooting incident that happens in the United States, you can almost guarantee that this picture will show up on Twitter. This is right-wing comedian Sam Hyde, but some people will always, with every shooting, claim that he is the perpetrator. It's gotten so bad that we have a draft article sitting in our content management system. So whenever there's a shooting, we just update that article with the local city name, and we can almost publish it. So one time I even beat the first instance of the fake image by 1 minute on Twitter. So our fact check was out 1 minute before the fake news was published. It's that predictable. So we call these the highway sharks. So a little quiz time. So there were certain protests in the US last week. So one of these monuments was vandalized by the protesters. So I'm told that there will now be an option in the chat where you can click on one of the replies. So was it one, these crosses, two, this memorial for Michael P. Murphy, or three, was it the Vietnam Memorial? Which one was vandalized? So I'll give you a few seconds to vote. I'm seeing a few number one, number two, number three. So 58% voted, 60% voted. I'm going to give it 5 more seconds. 66% of the, or 65% of the people in the chat say none of them were vandalized, and that's indeed the correct answer. None of them were vandalized, but several others were vandalized. So you never can tell for sure. Always check if this particular image that's making you angry or upset, if it's real. And this comes directly from the National Mall, from a verified account, so they know what they're speaking about. I'd like to conclude with a tip that I give everywhere I speak. So if it makes you angry or upset, Google it first before you hit the like or the share button. And don't be content with the first Google result. Last year with the Amazon forest fires, a lot of people were sharing this image. But that's an old image from several years ago. So you had to look deeper in the Google search results to actually find an article debunking that result. So Google it and don't just take the first result for an answer. Actually take time to click the links and read them. And if you do find that something is false, don't engage with it, because that will make the algorithm think on social media like Facebook or Twitter, that will make the algorithm think this is interesting content and that it should be shown to more people. And we're trying to avoid that. So don't react with an angry emoji. Don't shout fake in the comments. Don't like or share it. Instead, what you can do is click those 3 dots in the top right corner on Facebook and then find support or report posts and report it as fake news. Then it will land in our queue at Lead Stories or at one of the other fact checkers working with Facebook. And we can investigate and then put a fact-checking label over it if it turns out the post is indeed fake. So I'm gonna leave this here, but I'm gonna stop screen sharing, and so we can continue with the rest of the call.
Thank you, Maarten. Now I want to toss it over to HuffPost Senior Enterprise Editor Kate Sheppard for a conversation with Maarten and HuffPost reporter Jesselyn Cook on uncovering and uncovering misinformation and fake news. Kate.
Thank you so much, Maarten and Lizelle. I'm so excited to be here. I'm the Senior Enterprise Editor for Economy and Environment team. I've also covered misinformation and disinformation, particularly in science, for many years. I'm so pleased to have HuffPost reporter Jesselyn Cook here. Jesselyn is based in New York City normally, and she covers tech platforms, disinformation, online scams, and internet culture. I also had to laugh during Maarten's presentation because I saw multiple family members of mine share some of those photos this weekend. So it is an important topic right now. Jesselyn, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on some of the newer platforms? I know we think a lot about Facebook and Twitter, but what about some of the other social media platforms? What are you seeing in the disinformation trends there?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I think that Facebook and Twitter kind of are, like, people think of them as the main platforms, as the purveyors of disinformation and where this stuff typically goes viral. But Instagram, I think, kind of skates by so often, and it is a huge platform for disinformation. It is a cesspool. And even back in 2016, during the election, Russia's IRA used Instagram as its main platform to target people with fake news stories. So I think it's important to not really trust any platform that you're on, realize that any platform can be a host to disinformation, and just about all tech platforms, algorithms are known to promote and amplify this kind of content.
Great. And then for Maarten and for Jesselyn, how do you cover disinformation without unintentionally amplifying it?
Yeah, well, at Lead Stories. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, so at HuffPost, we do write a lot about false information that's going around, and we definitely don't want to amplify or draw more people towards the source of disinformation. So we typically try to never link to a false post or article. We can describe it. I wrote a piece recently about a bunch of influencers who are actually spreading disinformation on Instagram, and rather than linking to their pages, I would just describe what they were saying, debunk it in the article, and again, just never linking. You don't want to direct more traffic to false information.
Yeah, at Lead Stories, our subtitle of our site is "Just because it's trending doesn't mean it's true," and we try to focus on the viral, on the trending disinformation. So by the time we are working on it, it's usually already out there. So we have a policy, we do link to it, like it's over there and it's not true because blah, 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 blah. What we do use is the truth sandwich method of writing our articles. So if you have to talk about something that's not true, make sure it's embedded in a layer of truth. So the headline of our article will always contain just true statements, like Obama was not arrested at the border with a suitcase full of cash, if that's the story we're debunking. The first paragraph will ask the question and immediately answer it. Was Obama arrested at the border with a suitcase full of cash? No, that's not true. The story originated on a liberal satire website. And then in the middle part of the article, we will discuss why it's not true. We give the evidence, the experts, everything. And then we conclude by more truth, like to make sure that even if you just skim the article, you know the truth. And also, more importantly, if you share our article on social media, that the headline and the first sentence and the accompanying image also only contain truth. So we have a policy of taking screenshots of the fake content and slapping a sticker over it that doesn't just say false, but it explains why it's false. This is an old photo or manipulated or out of context or something like that. And the reason we do that is because sometimes people only see the social media card, like the title, the headline, and the thumbnail. And some fact-checking websites, they put a question in their headline, and their story will be titled, "Was Obama arrested at the border with a suitcase full of cash?" ? And then you see a picture of Obama. So 90% of the people who see that on Facebook will never click it, but something will stick in their mind. Oh yeah, Obama arrested, suitcase full of cash. They will remember that. While our story will say, clearly Obama was not arrested, and the image will say satire or something like that. So that's how we try to avoid amplifying the fake story, and to make sure that people only see the truth.
Great. Lizelle, do we have an audience question?
We do. Let's go to some of the questions that came in during our registration. There's a question from Gloria Winnie. What is the most obvious thing to recognize that the information is fake news?
The most obvious, yeah. If it was obvious, I wouldn't have a job. So often it's not really obvious. But one thing that should immediately set off your alarm bells if it makes you very angry or upset. That's when you lower your guard. When it confirms your own view of the world, like if you see, I don't know, a video of police misbehaving or protesters misbehaving, depending on what side of the debate you are on, you will immediately say, that's outrageous, I must share this, but stop and Google it first. Earlier this week, we debunked a video. Police officers were literally bashing the window of a police cruiser. And people were sharing this like, see, it's proof. The police is staging this. They are destroying their own car so they can blame it on the rioters. What happened was that rioters had in fact destroyed that police car and smashed in the window so that it was totally non-transparent, so you couldn't see through the window anymore. And these police officers were now removing what was left of the window so they could safely move the car aside. So that's my main tip. If it makes you angry or upset, that's when you should be extra careful.
I think a good place where I start is also looking at who is sharing this information and questioning why that may be. And it can be tricky, like it can be your cousin or your uncle sharing stuff on Facebook. But if you see like a giant YouTube account or Facebook page sharing something that seems really suspicious, it's important to be cognizant of the fact that there can be financial incentives for sharing disinformation. Platforms make it pretty easy for this kind of content to go viral, and people can make money off of viral content. Like influencers with a lot of followers can have brand deals on YouTube. If you get a lot of views on your video, sometimes you can take a cut of the ad revenue. The number of times someone watches a video, the more times they see the ads, and that means more money in someone's pocket. So algorithms are designed to keep you watching for as long as possible, and the more sensational content may be, the more eyes are going to be on it, which can mean more money for the people who are starting it.
I would also say one tip for me is to figure out what the source is, like the thing that's being shared. Sometimes the fake news site will have a name that like the URL looks kind of like a real news site. Like it'll be like, could be like a local news station somewhere, or we'll have ABC or NBC in there, but you want to go see what the actual like home site is and what's on that page and see if it is in fact, a real news station or some kind of weird thing that just popped up on the internet that generates basically fake things. So yeah, basically just check the original source URL.
Yeah, that's also, if it's a screenshot of a site or a tweet, that's also a telltale sign. If there's a real Trump tweet, why don't you just link to that tweet? Why do you need to put a screenshot? Like a lot of screenshots of Trump tweets are fake, for example.
And you can also check who else is reporting it. If it really is a big story, you're going to see multiple outlets reporting that news. And so if you just see one viral tweet and no one is really writing about it or talking about it on any official news channels, you should definitely be very skeptical.
And we have a live question from Dr. Stephen Panibianco. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. If you could introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, my name is Dr. Stephen Panibianco, and I'm an integrative medicine physician that focuses on mind-body medicine. And I live in Tucson, Arizona. And I had really two questions. And I think the first question you guys are already in the process of addressing. And it was essentially, what resources and web links are useful to help one discern quality of information from a non-ideologic perspective to reach balanced and accurate conclusions while also weeding out misinformation or underlying ideologic-driven agendas. And I think you're sort of doing that. And you can respond to that. But the other question could potentially be a little bit beyond the scope of this, but I get concerned when certain studies are cited and the general public gets manipulated in viewing a conclusion. A most recent example would be the hydroxychloroquine thing. So in credence to that, what resources and links would be useful to help people understand the power of a study and the basics of statistics to help discern the overall quality of a study and how that study can be or not be applied to already accumulated data? I guess what happens in many people's circumstances, they get a study, they hear it, and they look at that as sacrosanct truth, and that leads to often faulty conclusions.
I think
I'm happy to take the second one. I'm happy to take the second one because that really falls into my beat quite a bit, which is, I think the best idea on that front is to find a source that you do trust, whether that's like a scientific specific news outlet or a major publication, and you want to see what kind of language they use when they talk about a study. Is it peer reviewed? Is it do they talk to do they talk to experts beyond the people who were the authors of the paper to verify whether anybody else has found this to be true? How big was the study? A 5-person study is much less meaningful than a 300-person study, and a 2,000-person study is much more useful than a 300-person study. So you want to find a reliable outlet and then see how they're talking about the article, and then do they find other people who will say this is notable, this is groundbreaking or not? I mean, that's one of the problems with covering isolated reports, is that it's very hard to judge when you're not reaching out to other people. So good reporting will do that.
Gotcha.
I think there's a lot of room for journalists to improve here too, because quite often journalists, from what I've seen even the past few weeks, journalists have kind of been too eager to jump on studies with really tantalizing results, like the one you mentioned. And there was a study a couple weeks ago that suggested that half of all tweets about the coronavirus on Twitter were actually generated by bots. And of course, the study was written up all across the country by news outlets everywhere. And as it turned out, no one could replicate those results. And so I think it's important for journalists to do a better job, not just kind of writing up a press release, but really challenging the results they find, talking to the authors of the study, questioning their methods. So in that sense, journalists have actually played a bit of a role in amplifying misinformation themselves.
Yeah, when you get a link to a study, it's usually a PDF file. You should also check what the status of that study is. Has it actually been published in a peer-reviewed journal already, or is it still a preprint? Because when it's preprint, yeah, that's just a draft that hasn't been peer-reviewed yet. So any idiot with Microsoft Word can make a good looking PDF file and throw it on some website. So that's the first clue. The second clue is, does the article talking about the study accurately describe what's going on? Funny example, one of the stories that won't die is that there was a study saying that smelling farts protects you against cancer and heart disease. And if you go back and you follow all these articles pointing to each other and pointing back to the eventual study, it was about some sulfur compound in a medical trial in vitro. So they were not injecting it or using it on live humans. They were using it on cell cultures. And they were testing if that sulfur compound would help cells recover faster after maybe oxygen deprivation, possibly caused by a heart attack. But nowhere in that study was there anything about smelling or inhaling or vapors or anything like that. That was just a result of the university issuing a press release that said this sulfur compound consists of this and that chemical substance, which is also found in farts, by the way, ha ha ha. So it was just a throwaway joke by the PR department of the university, but yeah, a lot of journalists just, yeah, well, this fart compound will help you against heart disease, and then it got copied and pasted and changed until the headline of the articles was "Smelling farts will protect you from heart disease and cancer." So always go and look at the paper and see what the status of the paper is, and also see what the motivations of the people pointing to the study are. If it's a website that's trying to sell you all kinds of herbal magic pills that will protect you from 5G radiation, etc., they will throw PDF links at you. But yeah. Recently, we found one that was saying 5G causes this or that, and look, we have proof, and here's a paper. And that paper was actually about Wi-Fi. It wasn't even about 5G, and it was also widely discredited in other papers. So don't just trust one PDF link. Really understand what the study is about and where it came from and what the status of the study is.
So we have another live question from Georgie Grattan. If you could introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hey, I'm Georgie. I am a politics student from the UK in Exeter. I was just wondering, what do you think are the main motives for people producing fake news, maybe in light of the current coronavirus outbreak?
That's a great question. Go ahead, Maarten.
There are several motives. First, that was already mentioned, is simply money. People will put anything on a website if it gets people to click. So that's one reason. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be true as long as people will click on it. So if you have something that sounds good, okay, publish it, make money. So that's one motivation. A second motivation is simply misunderstandings and mistakes, like people misunderstanding a joke for real news. There were some rumors that coronavirus was breeding in toilet papers, but that came from a satirical meme, and some people believed it was real. And there's misunderstandings. For example, the CDC, they had a page up on their site that's saying if you have a throat infection, gargling with salt water will help ease the pain. But it doesn't cure the throat infection. It doesn't kill viruses or bacteria or anything. But somebody put that on a meme and changed the text a bit and said, yeah, gargling with salt water will kill the virus. And then people, out of a sense of, I have to share this information if it can protect my loved ones and my friends and my family, it might just help. So let's share this. I mean, what's the harm? And yeah, it went viral. So it's just people wanting to do good, but yeah, using bad information for it. So if instead they had Googled it first and said, oh, there are 5 fact checks saying that this is not true, they would have helped their friends and family a lot better than by sharing it. And then, of course, there's the political aspect. So like with everything, also coronavirus gets used as a wedge issue to divide, to stoke unrest and fear. And like the Russian troll operations, they literally don't care which cause they support or oppose. They just want to cause disagreement. In 2015 and 16 with the US presidential elections, a lot of people forget this, but they were also supporting Black Lives Matters and Blue Lives Matters and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton with various memes and bot campaigns. It's not that they specifically wanted Trump to win, they just wanted people to disagree about politics a lot. So those are the main reasons for spreading disinformation that I see most.
One that I would add outside of political or financial reasons is something I've seen a little more on Instagram, maybe with younger users, is clout. Like during the Amazon fires, a lot of accounts would spread these, what I thought were very obviously fake images. Like there was one of a moose running around with like on fire on his antlers, and spreading stuff like that, putting out photos like that. I think the motive there is just to draw more people to your page, to get more followers, to get more attention. Like we live in a kind of like attention economy in that way. And that could be financial too. A lot of Instagram pages will spread misinformation, really sensational content to build up their following. And then they will pivot their account. Like they'll delete all their posts, they'll change their Instagram handle to something completely separate, and then they'll try to sell the account, because an account with a lot of followers it can be really lucrative to get brand deals and stuff like that. So quite often it comes down to money, but sometimes people just want attention, I think.
We have another live question from Timothy Olson. If you could introduce yourself and where you're from.
I'm Tim Olson. I'm here in New York City in Manhattan. So I have a question. I noticed the word truth being used. I just want to emphasize the difference between truth and scientific consensus, because the two can be different, right? Scientific consensus, this is what we think at the current time is the truth, but may not actually be the truth. So for example, I was typing my question, one example in the 1980s, if you went to go see a doctor, you asked them, is butter or margarine healthier for you? At the time, margarine was mostly trans fat, right? And they would say margarine was healthy for you. Now we know trans fats are very bad for the heart. So it seems that scientific consensus changes over the time. This also relates to the lipid hypothesis, low-fat diets, which was prescribed by the government for a long time. When it started being prescribed, obesity rates skyrocketed. When we start to say, oh, we know the truth because of the current scientific consensus, and a lot of time we're taking a side, right, and totally dismissing the other side, saying, oh, you are misinformation, you are fake news, which we know, somebody else likes to do a lot of, right? Instead of saying, okay, there's a legitimate debate here, right? So I see this totally in the nutrition area. Even in the year 2020 right now, we see a big debate over whether meat is healthy, whether dietary cholesterol affects blood cholesterol. How do we, say, okay, we don't necessarily know if we know the truth. This is just scientific consensus.
I think the job for reporters is really to show your work and to be clear about who you're talking to, and to talk to multiple people who have different points of view on an issue. Obviously, I don't think we should go out and be like, climate change, is it real or not? But obviously there are a lot of different questions in climate change about like, how is this going to be, how severe is this? What are we uncertain about? What are the different opinions about what this data means? You can have room for uncertainty and disagreement within different scientific communities and different scientific, topics. And so for reporters, show your work, show that you're looking at peer-reviewed journals, show, if something is an outlier or where does it fit into the broader scheme of published papers. Talk to people who have different opinions, and, be pretty clear about, why people might have different thoughts about this or different takeaways from the data. And then also if we can report about people's motivations or funding or any other thing that might be underlying some of these questions. You know, if somebody's being funded by the sugar industry or the soft drink industry, obviously that might influence how they might be portraying things. And so I think as reporters, we should really show that work and be as transparent as we can about who we're speaking to and what the sort of weight of the evidence is.
Yeah, as fact checkers, sometimes you have to be able to say the answer to the question is we don't know yet. When the Corona crisis was breaking out here in Europe, the French media was saying don't use ibuprofen as a medicine, and the German media was saying no, I think the French were saying do use it, and the German media was saying don't use it, and they were all basing their reports on what scientists in local universities were saying. So at that point, all you can do is point out, yeah, these guys are saying this and those guys are saying that, but we don't know yet. Come back in 3 months when the studies have been completed. What you can do as fact checkers is if somebody makes 100% statement like all scientists say that it's like this, you can say, no, that's not true. Not all of them are saying it. Or if, especially people who are dealing in absolute statements, they very often have an agenda, like all fats are bad, or all meat is bad, or causes cancer, or like everything causes cancer. That's sort of a running joke with fact checkers too, like what's causing cancer this week. Something might double your chance of getting cancer from a minuscule amount to a slightly less minuscule amount, but that doesn't mean that breeding causes cancer, so to speak, like some websites would have you believe. So it's all important to put in the nuance. Sometimes it's not, this is 100% sure, but sometimes the answer just is we don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think
and people who
interesting
that we know are obviously lying.
I mean, I think an interesting recent example is the face mask question, right? For us as journalists, first the official advice was like, don't use masks if you're taking them away from medical providers. And then the CDC changed, and now the advice was you should be wearing them. And I think we should just be transparent about this is a change, and this is what our highest level medical advisors are now saying is true, and that is different than what it was before, and just being as transparent about that as possible.
And point out that no face masks will not kill you if you wear them, like some people are saying.
Oh yes, I've seen that one too. Yes. Lizelle, do we have another audience question, or I have one?
We do. We have another question that came through registration. This is from Terry Nyberg. And they asked, should I even try to persuade someone who is so locked into their ideology that they dismiss anything contradicting their belief?
I think that's something we see more and more now. I don't know if members of the audience are familiar with QAnon. It's a far-right conspiracy movement here in the US that claims there's a deep state cabal of pedophiles trying to take down Trump. And a lot of their claims seem so absurd. You have to question, like, how could anyone buy into that? But we've seen over the years since Trump's election, this movement has grown bigger and bigger and taken a hold on so many people. And you're seeing more stories come out of families talking about losing a loved one into this conspiracy movement. Like one woman wrote about her husband kind of becoming fully radicalized, and it caused a huge problem in their marriage because he was buying into all this nonsense. And so that's a tough question. I guess it depends like how far into it they are. And I know there are actually some people seeking professional help. Like some cult experts have talked about trying to essentially de-radicalize people who are buying really deeply into conspiracy theories. And I think a lot of this does come down to tech platforms. In many ways, their algorithms are designed to radicalize you and to drive you down those rabbit holes that are going to keep you glued to your screen for as long as possible. So it's tricky. I mean, if you can try to pull someone away from their device and have like a human-to-human conversation with them on a regular basis, I imagine that would help, but I don't have a definitive answer on that one.
Just a reminder for folks, don't forget to raise your virtual hand if you want to ask a question, and remember to check the chat feature, as our moderators may have sent you a message, trying to see if you would like to ask your question live. We do have another live question that we could go to.
Oh, Liz, I think we might have skipped over some of our poll question.
Yes, so we could go to a poll question now. Let's see. So where have you seen misinformation? You should see this poll on your screen now.
I'd like to answer the previous question quickly. About the conspiracy. People who are so far down the conspiracy rabbit hole. For some people, it becomes a core part of their identity. It's almost like a religion. Like if you want to try to convince a deeply religious person that God doesn't exist, they will reject it out of hand because they see it as a personal attack on their core personality. So they will reject all the evidence out of hand. So some people, they literally can't be saved from that conspiracy thinking without something very drastic happening in their personal lives. Like somebody who doesn't believe coronavirus exists and that it's 5G and aliens and Russians and Bill Gates and whatever. They might only start believing it once they get coronavirus themselves and nearly die from it. And then they might realize, oh, this is real. But you don't want to do that for obvious reasons. And as fact checkers, we know that there are certain people that can't be reasoned with. They're lost. But our fact checks are aimed at the people around them, the people who get the emails and the shared Facebook posts from those people. Like, yeah, crazy Uncle Joe is sharing something on Facebook again. Oh, what's this? This might have something to it. What's this about elite pedophiles? Oh, here's a fact check. Oh, yeah, of course, it's complete nonsense. Yeah, wow, okay, it's just another crazy Uncle Joe link. We're not going to convince crazy Uncle Joe because to him, we're just part of the satanic pedophile cabal anyway. And the fact that we try to disprove him proves that to him. Because why else would we be fact checking him? But to the family members, they might see the truth in our fact check and say, oh yeah, maybe Uncle Joe is just crazy and maybe we shouldn't start believing in these weird theories. So it's like a vaccine almost.
I had a related question, which is, if you're, not the crazy Uncle Joe's, maybe the like naive cousin Ronnie. Like, how do you deal when you see those folks in your own life? How do you deal when your own family and friends post something that you know is misinformation? What do you do?
I had a few family members share the Plandemic video. So that was startling. And I think in that case, that can be where journalism is really helpful because journalists will go out and talk to the experts and do the work for you to debunk false or unsubstantiated information. And so I ended up sharing with them the great BuzzFeed article. I don't know if you guys read it, but BuzzFeed came out really quickly and debunked a number of the false claims in that video. And the New York Times actually did a piece later on saying that if you look at the trend of how the context in which Plandemic was being shared, a lot of people are spreading it as like, this is real, I believe everything it says, to after BuzzFeed published its debunk, the dialogue around the video changed towards fact checking and saying like, this video is false, beware. So it really can be effective if you debunk quickly and sharply.
So let's see the results now from that poll.
Everywhere.
It's like everywhere. It's like all of the above. Okay. So we've got a lot of live questions and unfortunately we're running out of time. So let's see if we could get through the next one quickly. Thank you everyone for asking all your questions. So let's go to a live question from Henry Schirmer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Oh, actually, you got it right. Schirmer, like the piano company, piano music company, outside of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Attorney and hard science background. Was actually curious on getting into how do you make money selling people false facts. From my own experience, I actually been through law school and through med school, and it drives most people crazy that there's no straight answer, that you have to go looking through things and go fact checking and go through this. And it's something which is totally foreign to what most people think the world should be, that there's an answer someplace. Well, no, there's an answer for that, then there's an answer for that. You go ask 10 people and then figure this out. It's like, isn't there it written in the book somewhere about what this medical condition is? No. Isn't it written in the law what this medical condition is? No, you're pretty much playing judge roulette, you're playing doctor roulette, and that uncertainty just drives most people absolutely nuts. And I wanted to find out more about how, can you guys go into how do the false news and, doctors are hiding this one simple cure. How do we get money from that? Because that seems to be the main thing driving it. Isn't that people are really nasty, but they can sell you advertising.
Yeah, it's a simple question of supply and demand. People are looking for answers to questions, and you can provide them very cheaply. They don't cost anything. If you make something up that costs you nothing, to provide somebody with a correct answer, that costs money. Like, to actually, what's the cure for AIDS? If you have a medical degree, you know that it's not that simple, and you have to do DNA sequencing and analyze viruses and spend years and years and billions of dollars. Or you could just say, try these magnetic healing crystals. And they're both as both answers can be spread just as easily on the internet, but one just costs you nothing and the other is expensive. So of course you're going to see cheap fake answers to questions to which there is a lot of demand. But yeah, people need to realize that, like, you get what you pay for. If you get free information from some dodgy website, beware what the quality is.
It's also kind of remarkable just how sharply you can target information at a certain demographic. Like if you're trying to sell pills that are going to cure arthritis, you can really target that to people in the age group that might need or be interested in such a supplement or medication. And we see that all the time. Like Facebook makes it really easy to micro-target people based on their presumed interest, based on their clicking and viewing habits. So you can really sharply target people with misinformation that may specifically appeal to them, which makes it even scarier.
I think this is also a good time to mention that content farms, where people put up things that they just write about and don't bother doing any research or reporting on, are cheap, and doing journalism is expensive. So support your local journalistic outlet because they pay people to do that work.
Yeah, and the issue is on fixing that is not on the supply side, because supplying fake and cheap answers is easy and will continue being easy. But our best hope lies on the demand side, teaching people, hey, the first answer you find in Google or the meme on Facebook might not always be the best source of information you want. Google it first and look beyond the first result, because all that proves is that site is really good at search engine optimization. It doesn't prove that site is good at telling you correct information.
Great. Lizelle, do we have more audience?
Yeah, we'll probably be able to take one more. So let's take one last live question from Luther Leong. If you can introduce yourself and where you're from, and if you could keep it short, we'll get to your question.
Sure. Yeah, I'm out of just south of Rochester, New York, upstate New York. Actually, my question just really kind of goes to about sites that supposedly fact check, you know what I mean? So like what's, you know, is there any validity to using those sites like Snopes or Fact Check or Politico, and I mean HuffPost, obviously, you know, and you know, and BuzzFeed, whatever. But you know, where does that kind of fit in, you know, with what we're looking for when we're looking for the truth, basically?
I'll take that one if I may, because we are one of those sites. So most fact-checking websites are part of the IFCN, the International Fact Checkers Network, which is an organization that sets standards. And we're all required to adhere to a code of principles, and we get audited on that. So we have to be transparent, for example, about our finances, where does our money come from, about our ownership and our editorial team, like who are we? So you can't just launch an anonymous website and start fact-checking. Well, you can, but then you can't be part of the IFCN. You have to be transparent about your methodology, so you have to publish that on your site. Like, how do you check claims to fact-check? How do you then fact-check them? Which information do you give your readers? All that. So the goal is maximum transparency and explaining your sources and your methodology. So readers ideally should be able to reproduce the fact check on their own and follow along and follow the evidence that we provide or that the other fact checkers provide. Of course, it's a free country. You can still choose not to believe us even after all that. I mean, we don't say you have to believe us, but it's in our own interest to do the best job we can, because if we're untrustworthy and it can be proven that, hey, they're not using the correct sources or they're lying about their financing, etc., that blows away our whole credibility, and that's our biggest asset. But we always say you don't have to believe us because we're fact checkers, but you have to believe us because here is the evidence. Like, this video is 5 years old. This picture is not from the Washington Monument, but from a monument in LA. Yeah, you don't have to believe us, but we publish how we work, and we encourage everybody to follow our steps and to double check everything. We also get accused of bias a lot, and that's because people are in a filter bubble on social media. So on Facebook, they only get political news from one side because the algorithm only shows them that. They only like red stories, or they only like blue stories or blue pages or red pages. So if they see a fact check, obviously it's going to be fact-checking something that they liked and that they would have believed is true, but they're not going to see the fact checks that we do on the other side because they don't see those stories in their timeline. And to help fight against that impression, we literally added 2 categories to the top of our website, the red feed and the blue feed. Like, here are fact checks that Republicans will like, and here are fact checks that Democrats will like. And under every fact check, if it's a story or if we fact check something that Republicans like, and at the bottom there will be, if you want to contact us to complain about bias, please check the blue feed first, and vice versa. So people just don't see the fact checks on the other side of the debate because they never see the false stories on that side of the debate.
I'm sorry we weren't able to get to everyone's questions, but thank you so much for the great questions and for coming today. So let's just take one final poll if we can launch that.
Everyone who says no is lying.
Have you ever shared a story that you later learned that was false? And if we can get the results from that. So you are not alone, 78%. So you are not alone. So hopefully this workshop has armed you with the tools to help you distinguish which is false and true. So thank you again for joining us today. If you want to financially support the work we're doing and you're able to do so, consider joining HuffPost Plus as a monthly or annual paid member. Lastly, we'd love to hear what you thought of today's event. So we'll be sending out a survey, be on the lookout. And as part of registering for our workshop today, you'll be receiving a tip sheet to remind you of all the fact-checking best practices. Thanks again to Maarten, Kate, and Jesselyn, and to all our moderators. So have a great one, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks for all the questions.